It is now time to start working with the database, and Adonis gives us two tools to do that. First, we have the Query Builder, which is a tool that lets us build SQL queries to read and write from the database. And then we have Lucid, which is a tool that is kind of a wrapper around the Query Builder. And Lucid is Adonis's implementation of the active record pattern. And if you've never heard that, I guess the simplest way to put it would be you can think of that as using like a class that wraps around a specific instance of interaction with the database. So you have a class that would then give you various methods on it that make it kind of easier to read and write and do different things with the database. Now, you wouldn't use something like this for every single query, but it is helpful in many situations. Now, in my experience, on any given project, you'll likely end up working with both queries in a query builder and then something like Lucid. If you've ever worked with Laravel, for example, you have Eloquent, which is sort of the Lucid of Laravel, and you can also write more raw queries using that tool. So you'll end up using both. It's a good idea to get familiar with both. Now, to get started, you can have a quick look over the Lucid documentation here, and you can read some of the benefits that Harminder has outlined as to why you would want to use something like Lucid over just writing queries yourself. And that's a good read. That's good to look at. And then the Query Builder, if you're using that, you'll see a lot of the operations on the Query Builder will match what you see in the Knex documentation. So this may not look very full to you, the Query Builder documentation here on Adonis, but if you hop over to Knex, you'll see a lot more there. Now let's begin taking a closer look at Lucid first and working with the customer controller. And after we're done on all of that, we'll go through the Query Builder so you can compare the two. And I think you'll find that in many cases, Lucid makes your job a lot easier. So we'll start with the store method because I want to add customers to the database before I can actually read them back and update them. So let's begin with store, and we'll start by heading over to the Lucid documentation. And we'll just scroll down and we'll find an example of how we can create a new customer. And that will be actually inserts and updates. That's what we're looking at. So we want to insert new data to the database. Now there are two ways we can do this. We can use the save method, but if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see that there's also a create method. And really you can use either one. And I'll show you, we'll go through the difference first, and then I'll show you in the source code for Lucid what's actually happening under the hood. So with models, instead of inserting raw values, it says you want to persist the model instance, then you can use this query function right here, save. So in this case, we're starting a new user with the new keyword, and then we're manually adding the username and the email property on the user model, and then we save it. And you notice that the await keyword is used, and that's because each of these functions are an async function, and we need to put the await keyword before anything that returns a promise, and that would include all of these functions on the models that interact with the database. So we can't forget that. So let's copy this, we'll bring it in, and we'll take a look at what's actually happening. Now this first statement at the top here, use, that belongs at the top outside of the class definition. And what this is actually doing is it's bringing in the model from our models file. So you look in app directory, models, customer, that's what we need to bring in. So user will change to customer, of course. And this will also be customer, new customer equals customer. And I want to change this to customer save. Now, for our customer, we don't have username and email. We have name and description. So let's do those right here, those properties. And where is this information coming from? You may remember that with a post request to use the store method, the data that's being used to create that new customer is coming on the request body. So here we have the body. And we can actually use ES6 destructuring here to take out the name and the description values that we need. So our customer name will be name, customer description will be description, and then we can save it. And upon save, the ID for that new customer will automatically be added to that customer's details, the customer object. Now it's important to know here though that customer with the save function on it obviously isn't just the customer object. That's there's a little bit more involved there. And I want to take a quick look at what is actually there so you can get a feel for what you're dealing with in the future. So I will just put a debugger statement here. And I'll start up my debugger and we can kind of take a peek under the hood. And let's see if that's running. Is that running? Yes, it is. Okay, so I'll hop over to Postman now, and I'll make a post request to customers, and we'll see what we're looking at. So here in debugger, you see customer right there. There's actually quite a bit going on here. If you dig into the customer, the target right there, and you go down or I should say up the prototype chain a number of steps, you'll see lots of different methods available on there. Okay, now a lot of that you can just kind of skip all of this. I'll turn that off now. And you jump over to into node modules, AdonisJS, down to Lucid, and then into source, down to Lucid again, into model, and then the index file. Okay, so you go down there, and we'll use here, there's a little shortcut in most editors, it's called go to symbol usually. So go to a symbol in a file. I recommend you have a shortcut for that, it makes things very easy. And we will jump to the save method. Now with save, it makes mention that the save model method persists the instance to the database. So you can actually save a number of times. So here you see this happening, that if the object is new, if the record is a new record, it will insert it. But then once you make another update, if you want to save it again, it'll be smart enough to know, okay, we're updating this time. And even under the hood, you can take a look at the insert. And you can even dig further in. We've got a query being built up here. We're making our insert there, etc. So I'll go back to save. And that is what that looks like. So what's happening in our code to the controller is we're saving that customer. Now, if you're dealing with templating, if you're using Edge and you're actually doing a full stack app here, you will need to call toJSON on this. So the customer has a method called toJSON, and it's important to run that so that I won't get too deep into it, but certain things happen before you send it off to the view. You won't have the actual data. You'll have a big wrapper around it if you send it to the view just as customer. So you want to call toJSON on that. But in our case, we're returning a response, a JSON response, so we are okay with just passing up customer just like that. So now we have our customer. We can just send it back in our JSON response and all is good. We'll have all the customer details on there without all the other stuff. Let's see. Now the second way we can do this, we don't need to use the save, we can use create. So we just go down a little bit and you'll see that create is a little bit tighter. There's a little bit less going on, a little less that you have to type. So it's kind of nicer to use. So in this case, we'll just copy this and I'm going to comment that out so you can compare the two. Now here we're using destructuring to get the name and description on the post request object, using the post method. Request also has an only method and you can pull out individual properties using it like this. So I mean you can use either one, it's completely up to you. I'm just fine with this method. So I won't bother using that. So I will grab my name and description. Now with create, you just pass up an object. We do not have to do customer name equals name, customer description equals description. We can just pass up the object in its entirety and we will create it. Now the thing with user, or I should say customer create, you'll notice right away we're not using the new keyword. We're just accessing create on the customer model directly. And what will happen, this will actually return the instance of the customer model. Whereas save, let's go back to here. You'll see save just kind of returns these functions. It either insert or update, so it returns whatever those return. Create returns the instance. And we'll actually go to the create function. You'll see how that's working. So you go to create. We have our payload, which is our object that gives us the details we need for the customer. It creates a new instance under the hood. So there's our new statement right there. Then it's filled with the details that we just passed up, and there we go. It uses save. So we're actually using save just like up here, but it does it under the hood and gives us kind of a nice, more succinct way of doing it. And it'll shoot back the model instance. We're actually getting a copy of the instance again. And we can continue to do things with it. Now in this case, we have our customer. We can just send it right back up. And so this is quite a bit shorter than that. And I kind of like that better. So I'm going to stick with that. Now let's test it out. Let's actually create a customer. So we'll go to Postman. We have our details for Bruce Wayne. We have to make sure our server is running. Adonis serve dev. And we'll send. Here we have successfully created a new customer. Now it's playing around a little bit, so we have an ID of 3, not an ID of 1, but that's just fine. Let's hop over to our database. I'll do a select from the customers table just to see what we have in there. Oh, we have a couple of them. Again, I was fooling around a little bit before, so we have our number 3. Let's actually clear this out. And you can see that I'm not lying to you. So select again, empty database. Let's create Peter Parker this time. The Amazing Spider-Man. Now he should be an ID 4. There we go. ID 4, Peter Parker. Reselect, and there we go. We have our record. So our store was successful. Very, very short code. Really don't need a whole lot to get this done. Now you'll notice though that we didn't do any sort of validation to make sure that the name and the description existed. And when we created our table, I did not set it up to disallow null values, and that's fine. This is just an exercise to get familiar with the framework. When you're actually working, you'll want to implement that. You'll probably want to make these fields not nullable, so that means they have to be filled out, at least the name, I would think. And since this is an API, your front-end code, be it Vue or React, that would be the one that should be responsible perhaps for validating whether or not the details are there. So you don't even bother sending the request if the form is empty, for example. So you do that on your front end. If this were a full stack app, then we could handle it right here. That will be for another series, but for now, just know that in your front end, you should manage to make sure that you've got your name and description actually there before even bothering to send the request. So we've got that. Now, let's wire up our index methods and our show method. Now, the index method will be the one to fetch the list of customers, and the show method will be the one to fetch a single customer. And actually, before I do that, let's create another customer. Now we'll put Bruce back in there. Let's put a little description there. We'll send them. And now we have 2 customers in our database. Select. Yeah, so we have Bruce and Peter in there. So let's wire up our index. Now, if we hop over to Lucid again, we want to fetch all customers. And that's right at the top, just below the introduction. Basic example. Fetching users, fetching customers. This is all we need. User.all. Okay, so let's return, well, we won't return that. Actually, I want to send that in a different formatted response. So we'll go up here, and we'll say const customers equals await customer.all. And that will give us all of our customers. Change this to message. Here are your customers. And the data, customers. All right, let's try that out. Go back to Postman. We'll change this to a GET request for customers, send, and we should have 2 of them. So that works. Now let's try our show method where we're fetching an individual customer based on ID. And let's hop over to our documentation again. We want to, let's see if I can find it here. We want to find a single customer. So fetching all users, that's pretty clear. If we just want to fetch a single customer, how do we do that? Here we go. Static methods. So these right here, if you hop over to the source code, down to index, again, go to symbol, gives you a nice high-level view of all the methods on the class. Let's try the find method. There we go. So this is what we're looking at right here, find. If we go to find, it says find a row using the primary key. So our primary key is the ID. That's the unique identifier for that row. So we use find, and then it implements a find by under the hood to find our record. So we'll go back to our controller there. That's what I want. We'll go down to show, and we have our ID. We pulled it out before. So let's say const customer equals customer dot find. Remember, we have the find method. Let's see, where were we? We have the find method here, and this is on our model, which is customer, and we simply pass in the ID. That's the primary key that we need to pass in. So we pass in our ID, and assuming we find our customer, we send them back. Now, what if we don't find our customer? What if it's not found, right? So we do need a little bit of a check here. If customer, return that, else can return 404. So actually I forgot to set my status codes in here. So everything's okay, 200. Let's go up here real quick before we forget. Status for creating a new customer, 201, created a new entry. When you're fetching here, status 200. Now it's important to note that here on the index method, even if there are no customers, it will just return an empty array. So the request was still successful. It's just an empty array. So we do that. Now down here, showing a specific customer. Status 404, cannot find. Customer not found. And we'll pass back the ID because we don't have the customer at that point. All right, so let's try that. Let's go to Postman. We will use a get request again, yeah. And this time let's get Peter at ID 4. Oh, empty. Now why is that? Let's see, make sure I got that properly. Double check the example. Find one. Oh, I didn't use the await statement. That's why. I need the await keyword because this is an asynchronous operation. So let's try that again. What am I looking at? There we go. Send. And there's our Peter Parker. Now let's try 6. We don't have a customer 6. So we should say, yeah, customer not found. So that's perfect. Now there are other ways to handle that. You can see just below here we have a find or fail. We won't get into that right now. We can play with that in another series when we get in a little more depth with using Lucid and the query builder. So for now, we'll just code up a simple 404. And update. We want to wire up our update. So an update is not unlike a store, except we won't use the create method. We'll go back to our save method because the save is what we use to update something. So go back to our documentation, inserts and updates. We want to find that customer. So again, we have a find and we can return a 404 if they're not there. And if we do have the customer, then we want to, at that point, take the updated details from the request body. No point in getting it beforehand. So I'll just copy this message here. Get rid of that. And let me see, we get our body. Let's take out what we need, name and description. Now, if either one of these, or all of them, it shouldn't be all of them, but either one of them are left blank, so they're undefined, then they will just be ignored when we send our update up to the database. Let's see. Now here we have to update things individually. And again, if either one of these are undefined, then it will just be ignored. And here we send now we have our customer, and now we do a save. Okay, so customer save. I should remember to await this time. And when the save is finished, then we'll just send the updated customer information. Successfully updated this customer. So here we go. Let's walk through this one step at a time again. So we first look for the customer, and if we find the customer, proceed with the update. If we don't, just send off a 404. Now let's say we do find the customer. We pull out the new name and description from our request body, and then we update those individual properties on the customer object, and then we save. After the save, we await it. So after the save, then we send back our 200 response to say that we successfully updated that customer. So let's jump back to Postman. We will do a patch request for the update. We will patch Spider-Man at 4. And actually let's do 5 because we already have Bruce Wayne right there. So let's change his description to "This is Batman." So we just change it a little bit. We'll send, and we get a success. Okay, we updated, and there's the new information. This is Batman. Now, just to make sure, we will fetch all the customers again. Let's get customer 5, actually. And we'll see, yeah, we have the data right there. Let's check our database, reselect. This is Batman. So everything was updated just fine. If we try to update customer ID 6, we won't find them. Send, we should get a 404. Yeah, that's perfect. And there's our 404. So that's working just fine. Now for a delete. Delete, we should find, so it's the same thing. We're going to find the customer. If we find the customer, let's delete them. Successfully deleted. Customer not found 404. Now, of course, with a deletion, we don't need anything on the request body because we're not changing any data. So we'll take that out. We don't need to update name or description. Take that out. And instead of save, it's the delete method. And of course, we await it again. And when that goes through, when that resolves, then we send our success message. So successfully deleted 200. We won't bother sending back the customer this time. We'll just send back the ID. And that's it. Let's try that. So we'll hop over to Postman. Let's delete Batman this time, ID 5. Successfully deleted this customer. Let's get all of our customers just to make sure. Well, let's try Batman. Not found. Get our list of customers. Just Spider-Man left. So all of those are working just fine. If you have any questions about that, please post them down below the video. You can also reach out to me on Twitter as always. In the next section, we will redo a lot of this with Query Builder so you can compare the two. And we'll also be looking at a different way that we can handle this part right here. As you can see, it's a little tedious trying to find the customer 3 different times and doing this little check at the end. Okay, it's a lot of typing. You can imagine our controller can get kind of messy if there's other things in there. So I'll show you a better way to do that as well. All right, cheers.